Meet Leon, our so-called legendary dragon slayer, who, after failing spectacularly at his one job, found himself in the not-so-cozy captivity of the Silver Dragon Queen. Facing certain death, he thought, why not go out with a bang and unleash some forbidden magic to curse her? But, plot twist, this spell didn't exactly go as planned. Instead of eternal pain, the queen lost control and, well, let's just say things got really personal. Leon figured his little act of vengeance would leave the mighty queen humiliated forever. Mission accomplished, right? Fast forward 2 years and Leon wakes up expecting either revenge or oblivion. But instead, what's next to him? A tiny dragon girl with a tail. That's right, folks, surprise! Turns out he's now the proud father of the queen's daughter. Who knew being a dragon slayer would come with diaper duty? The story begins. In the damp, dimly lit confines of the Silver Dragon dungeon, the heavy clank of armored feet echoed as the dragon soldiers guarded the cells. It was a day like any other until she arrived, a shadowy figure cloaked in regal splendor. The soldiers straightened immediately, recognizing her before they could even glimpse her face. "Your Majesty," they stammered, their heads bowing as if her gaze alone might singe their scales. Rosweiss, the Silver Dragon Queen, ruler of all dragons and undisputed queen of sarcasm, merely waved her hand, her voice like honey mixed with venom. "Leave me. I wish to speak with him. Alone." Her tone was so sharp it could cut through metal. Obediently, the soldiers scattered, thankful they weren't on the receiving end of her attention. Inside, bound in chains, sat the man who had once been humanity's greatest weapon against her kind. Leon Cosmode, the infamous Dragon Slayer. A man who was now, well, let's just say his glory days were behind him, and those chains weren't doing wonders for his pride. Ah, the great dragon-slaying hero. Rosweiss's voice dripped with mockery as she entered the cell, her presence filling the small space with a suffocating weight. How does it feel to be reduced to this? Prisoner of the Dragon Clan? She leaned in, her silver eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Kill me," Leon spat out, his voice hoarse but defiant. There wasn't much dignity left in him, but what remained was stubborn as hell. Rosweiss laughed, a sound that was more dangerous than joyful. Oh, how predictable. A quick death? No, darling, that won't do. She grabbed his chin, tilting his face up to meet her eyes. You're far too handsome for such a boring end, and so resolute. A sharp nail traced down his cheek before scratching just deep enough to draw blood. I think a few more scars would make you perfect. Leon winced, feeling the sting of the wound. Stop humiliating me, he growled, his voice cracking under the weight of his frustration. If you're going to kill me or chop me into pieces, then just get on with it. Do it fast. The Dragon Queen released his chin, licking the blood from her finger with a smirk. If you hadn't been framed by that conniving villain, you wouldn't be here in this pitiful state, would you? Her voice was soft, but her words cut deep. Tell me, Leon, have you considered joining the Silver Dragon Clan? Leon's eyes narrowed. Are you even worthy? His voice was laced with disdain, and his expression said it all. I'm still better than you, even like this. Her response was quick, faster than he could process. She kicked him so hard his chains shattered, sending him crashing into the stone wall, blood spraying from his mouth as he gasped for air. She wasn't playing around anymore. How *** you talk down to me, prisoner? Rosweiss seethed, stepping on his chest, pinning him to the cold ground. Do you still think you're some great hero of humanity? Praised by thousands, admired by all. She leaned in closer, her voice dripping with mockery. Do you still dream of wiping out the Dragon Clan, leaving behind your oh-so-noble legacy? Leon wheezed, blood dribbling from his lips. Don't underestimate humans, he rasped. Ross Weiss's tail snaked around his body, lifting him effortlessly into the air. Humans, she scoffed, tightening her grip as Leon struggled. You're all so stubborn. How adorable. She lifted him higher, her tail constricting like a snake ready to strike. But this time you've met your match. Leon gritted his teeth. Your Majesty, he hissed. Ross Weiss paused, curious. Oh, finally ready to beg for mercy? No, Leon said, glaring at her. You made two crucial mistakes. She raised an eyebrow, amused. Do tell. First, he coughed, you should never be alone with the most powerful dragon slayer trained to kill your kind. He paused, letting the tension hang in the air. Second, you should never have tasted my blood. Before Ross Weiss could react, Leon's eyes glowed with a strange light. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through her body. A blood curse, one she hadn't anticipated. She gasped, her grip on him loosening as she stumbled back, clutching her chest. What have you done? Leon fell to the ground, breathing heavily but grinning. That's what happens when you try to play with magic you don't understand. Soon you'll be tormented by soul-crushing pain. Forever. Ross Weiss's eyes widened, her breath becoming ragged. Her entire body burned as if flames were licking at her skin. She fell to her knees, her face flushed, her body trembling uncontrollably. What is this feeling? She gasped, her breath coming in heavy pants. Leon watched, confused. This wasn't the reaction he expected. Was she enjoying this? Ross Weiss suddenly lunged at him, pinning him to the floor, her flushed face hovering just inches from his. Her eyes were wild, her breathing even heavier. You bastard, she growled, but her voice had lost its sharpness. It was almost desperate. Leon's heart raced. Wait, what's going on? He thought, his brain struggling to keep up with the absurdity of the situation. As he looked into her eyes, he saw something unexpected. Desire? No, that couldn't be it. But her face was definitely flushed. Before he could process it, Ross Weiss leaned in and kissed him. Hard. Her lips crashed against his with a force that left him completely stunned. He froze, his mind going blank as she deepened the kiss, her body pressing against his. Leon's face turned red, his brain short-circuiting. This is not what I signed up for. But there he was, caught between a rock and, well, the Silver Dragon Queen. What happened next? Well, let's just say the chains weren't the only things getting broken that day. An hour later, the dungeon floor is an utter battlefield of discarded clothes, betrayal, and bad decisions. Ross Weiss, the Silver Dragon Queen, stirred awake, her vision still blurred, her head still spinning. As the haze lifted, she blinked at the sight of her own naked body. It didn't take long for reality to hit. Hard. With a furious roar that shook the very walls of the dungeon, she whipped her head toward Leon, who was now awake and much too calm for someone who'd just been part of a catastrophic mistake. What the hell did you do to me? She bellowed, her silver eyes blazing with a mix of fury, humiliation, and sheer disbelief. Leon, ever the cool-headed type, blinked, unfazed by the hurricane of dragon rage aimed at him. Relax, it's the blood curse, he explained, his voice flat like he was reciting a grocery list. A forbidden technique that can only be used once in a lifetime. He shot her a deadpan look. Once I die, the curse will cause you endless pain. Ross Weiss's eyes widened in disbelief, her fists clenching. Endless pain. That's what you're worried about? What about this? She gestured wildly at the two of them, her rage growing hotter with each word. What just happened? Leon, still groggy and clearly regretting everything, rubbed the back of his neck. Oh, that. He cleared his throat, the faintest blush coloring his face. That was an accident. Accident? Ross Weiss's voice was now at a pitch that could probably break the glass. "I believed the curse's pain would only manifest after my death," Leon continued, trying to remain composed, despite the fact that he was very much at ground zero of a dragon-shaped bomb. "But, I didn't anticipate certain side effects." Ross Weiss blinked at him, her fury boiling into something far more dangerous. "Side effects?" she hissed. "Which apparently caused your arousal," Leon added, wincing at the last part. He immediately wished he could take those words back. Ross Weiss's face went from furious red to mortified scarlet in the blink of an eye. "Shut up!" She spat the words through gritted teeth, desperately trying to preserve what little dignity she had left. Leon, however, decided now was a great time to go for broke. "As far as I know," he began slowly, his voice maddeningly calm, "dragons follow the rule of monogamy, correct?" He arched a brow. "That means you're stuck with me now." Ross Weiss's eyes blazed. She was 2 seconds away from incinerating him on the spot. Leon continued unbothered. "After my death, the great Silver Dragon Queen will not only be unable to find a new mate, but also unable to bear offspring." He shrugged as if this were a minor inconvenience. "Good luck explaining that to the Dragon Clan." Ross Weiss's mouth opened, but no words came. She was absolutely speechless, truly a first for her. Meanwhile, Leon, oblivious or perhaps just suicidal, kept going. "And let's not forget," he added, his voice low and mocking, "you said earlier I would have no successor." He gave her a knowing look. "Looks like you won't either." That did it. With a growl that could have shattered mountains, Ross Weiss charged at him, her hand glowing with a fiery aura as she prepared to strike him down. Just as her hand was inches from his chest, Leon's calm voice cut through the tension. "Go ahead," he said coolly, meeting her eyes without flinching. "Kill me, but you don't need to do it yourself. I'm going to die soon anyway. You can spend the rest of your life hating me, living in agony. That's my curse to you?" Ross Weiss paused, her hand trembling as the aura around it dimmed. Her breath came in ragged bursts as she stared down at him, torn between killing him on the spot and letting him die in the slow, miserable way he had promised. After what felt like an eternity, she withdrew her hand, taking several steps back. She turned her expression one of cold disdain. "You humans," she muttered, her voice dripping with venom. "Always so despicable. You think this is revenge?" Ross Weiss scoffed, her fury only barely contained. "You want to die. You want the easy way out." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "How can it be that easy?" With a flick of her wrist, she cast a spell, her hand glowing with powerful magic. Leon didn't even have time to react before she slammed her palm onto his chest, sending a shock of energy straight into his body. Once upon a time, Leon Cosmode was hailed as the ultimate dragon-slaying hero. His legend began not at the age most heroes are swinging swords, but at a tender 5 years old, when he ripped his neighbor's vicious dog to shreds with his bare hands. That little outburst of violent heroism caught the eye of a renowned dragon slayer, who thought, "Ah yes, this murderous child will do just fine," and promptly made him his apprentice. By the time Leon turned 10, he had entered the Imperial Dragon Slayer Academy. By 14, he had graduated at the top of his class, a prodigy who held the illustrious title of the youngest and most highly evaluated student in history. At 15, Leon was unleashed onto the battlefield, killing dragons left and right, recapturing territory like he was on a leisurely Sunday stroll, and collecting more military accolades than he knew what to do with. He was the Empire's brightest beacon of hope, their poster boy for victory in the Dragon War. Then he got captured by the Dragon Clan. Fast forward 2 years, and Leon, who up until now was probably enjoying a long and undisturbed nap, wakes up gasping for breath. clutching his chest as if he'd just narrowly escaped death itself. He sits up, bewildered, eyes darting around the unfamiliar room. Where the hell is he? Heaven, maybe. That's when he notices her peeking from behind the door, a little girl with black and white hair, watching him like he's some kind of exotic zoo animal. Surprised, Leon's face flushes. Cute, he thinks, before immediately wondering if he's dead and this is his reward for all those heroic deeds. After all, with all the dragons he sent to an early grave, he must have secured himself a spot in the VIP section of the afterlife. "You finally awake?" the girl asks, her voice innocent and curious. Leon rubs his head, trying to piece it all together. "Heaven," he mutters. "I must be in heaven." He points dramatically at her. "And you, little one, must be an angel." The girl tilts her head, completely baffled. "What's an angel?" Leon, completely buying into his own delusion, grins. "Ah, how lovely. A pure, innocent angel who doesn't even know what she is." He sits up straighter, offering her a gentlemanly bow. "My dear little angel, what is your name?" "Moon," she replies, smiling. "Moon, what a lovely name for an angel." Leon beams, though inwardly he's wondering why this celestial being has such strange hair. "Might I ask, why is your hair so unusual?" "Mama said it means moon," Moon explains, clearly proud of this fact. Leon pauses, frowning. Do angels have mothers? Before he can untangle that mess, Moon cheerfully adds, "Mama also said Leon means a leon." "Wait, what?" Leon's shock is palpable. "Who told you that?" "Mama," Moon giant chirps. Leon's brain freezes for a moment. "And your mother is—" "Ross Weiss," Moon replies as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. Leon's face falls into utter devastation. "Ross Weiss? Then that means—" His words trail off, horror creeping in. He looks at the innocent little girl, his voice barely a whisper. I'm your—" Moon, delighted, claps her hands. "Yep, you're my dad." Leon's world shatters. His jaw drops, his head spins. "Dad?" He clutches his head as if the sheer weight of this revelation is going to crush him. "I'm her dad? This child? Ross Weiss's child is mine?" Before he can properly process his impending existential crisis, Moon suddenly runs toward the door, shouting gleefully, "Mom! Dad's awake!" Leon looks up, feeling a wave of dread wash over him as Ross Weiss, the Silver Dragon Queen herself, steps into the room. She's as cold and distant as ever, her eyes boring into him with a mixture of disdain and amusement. Moon hugs her mother tightly. "Mom's been visiting you every day," she says happily. "She must be so happy you're awake." Ross Weiss gives Leon a long, icy stare before turning to Moon. "Yes, darling," she says with a faint smirk. "I know. Now go play outside. I need to talk to your father." Moon skips off, leaving the room far too cheerful for the disaster that's about to unfold. Leon, still grappling with this absurd reality, can barely form words. "Is she really mine?" Ross Weiss narrows her eyes. "What else could she be?" Her voice is laced with venom as she confirms Muon's parentage, her tail slowly closing the door behind her with an ominous thud. Leon grits his teeth, anger bubbling up inside him. "You hate me. Why did you give birth to our child? Why did you even save me?" Ross Weiss's gaze hardens. "You've been asleep for 2 years. Did you think I'd simply forget what you did to me?" Leon clenches his fists, his voice rising. "You think I wanted this? You and I, we're different. We could never coexist if it were any other time. I never would have touched me." Ross Weiss interrupts, her lips curling into a smirk. "So touching me is torture for you, is it?" "Of course it is," Leon snaps. In a flash, Ross Weiss's tail wraps around Leon's leg, pulling him down onto the bed with force. She climbs on top of him, her movements deliberate, her expression deadly. "And now?" she asks, her voice a dangerous whisper. Leon's heart races. "What are you going to do? Without answering, Rossweiss tears open his shirt and begins casting a spell, her hand glowing with ancient magic. "I'm going to carve my dragon mark into you," she says coldly. "Stop," Leon protests, but it's too late. The spell takes hold, a searing pain erupting in his chest as the mark of the Silver Dragon Queen burns into his skin. Rossweiss watches as the mark also appears on her own chest, a twisted reflection of their bond. "This will be your shame," she says, her voice icy. "From now on, you will be my prisoner. You'll never leave me. When your fellow humans see this mark, they'll wonder, are you still a great dragon-slaying hero, or a traitor who surrendered to the Dragon Clan?" Leon grits his teeth, barely containing his fury. "Why are you doing this?" Rossweiss places a finger on his lips, silencing him. "Don't you understand? For us dragons, revenge is an art form, a concept that surpasses human comprehension. You wanted to destroy me, Leon, but now you'll live the rest of your life in my shadow, humiliated by me at every turn." Leon's face turns red, his body burning with shame as he realizes the full weight of her revenge. For the Silver Dragon Queen, there could be no greater honor than turning the greatest dragon slayer in human history into a prisoner, her plaything, her closest and most reluctant companion. Leaning in close, her lips just inches from his, Rossweiss smirks. "Now, Leon Cosmode," she whispers, her breath hot against his skin. "It's time to get started." In the grand halls of the Silver Dragon Castle, the air was unusually light. Two maids, their tails swishing lazily, whispered to one another. "The Queen seems to be in a good mood today," one remarked with a conspiratorial grin. "Don't you know?" the other asked, eyes wide with gossip. "Her husband woke up." Leon pressed against the cold stone wall just around the corner, nearly choked on his own indignation. "Husband?" He gritted his teeth, fists clenching at his sides. "That female dragon actually announced to the public that I'm her husband? Oh, if only they knew. If only they had a clue how terrifying the Silver Dragon Queen really was." His mind flashed back to last night. That night. Rossweiss's dragon instincts had been intense, to say the least. She had squeezed every last drop of energy out of him, dragging him to his very limits, leaving his waist practically shattered. He felt like a discarded rag, tossed aside after hours of her relentless enthusiasm. His back still ached, his legs were wobbly, and his pride, well, that was thoroughly demolished. "I will never stay here and become her plaything," Leon vowed silently, fists tightening even more. "Never." He peeked around the corner, eyes darting to the side door. 4 dragons were stationed there, their massive figures making any thought of slipping past them laughable. Damn. Why was it so quiet today? Something wasn't right. The entire castle felt off. Then he spotted it, a small hole in the wall. A hole? Here? He squinted. It was suspicious. Too convenient. It's gotta be a trap. But what choice did he have? "I'm not staying another night here," he resolved. Even if it was a trap, he'd have to try. He crouched down, muttering to himself as he squeezed through the gap. "Farewell, perverted mother dragon," he muttered. "Moon's cute, sure, but she's all yours, Rossweiss." Unbeknownst to him, Moon had been quietly watching from a distance. "Mom," she called out excitedly, running up to her mother. "Dad's digging a hole. He's so cool." Rossweiss, her cold gaze softening for a moment, acknowledged her daughter with a smirk. "He is pretty awesome, isn't he?" Moon, eyes wide with awe, asked innocently, "When are you going to fish him back?" Rossweiss's smirk twisted into something more sinister. "Moon, darling, we don't fish him back. It's rude to say that about your father." "Then what should I say?" Moon tilted her head in confusion. Rossweiss's tail flicked in amusement. "We catch him back, my love. That's the proper term." Meanwhile, Leon had finally squeezed himself through the hole, adrenaline pumping. He bolted into the forest, running as fast as his legs would carry him. Just a few more mountains, he thought, and I'll be back in human territory. Surely, if he got far enough, Ross Weiss wouldn't be able to catch up, right? As the wind whipped around him, he felt a chill run down his spine. Something wasn't right. He glanced up and immediately regretted it. There she was, Ross Weiss in her full dragon form, gliding effortlessly through the air above him. Her massive wings blocked out the sun as she caught up to him in mere moments. Leon's heart sank, and he let out an exasperated scream. "Oh, come on!" Ross Weiss's voice boomed from above, amusement dripping from every word. "You're quite the runner, Leon." Panic surged through him, but he kept running, legs burning, lungs screaming for air. He wasn't stopping. Not now. Not after all this. Ross Weiss swooped down, effortlessly landing in front of him, cutting off his path. She tilted her head in mock curiosity. "Do you think this little game is fun, Leon? You don't find it too easy, do you?" Leon, panting and seething, glared at her. "What's your point?" he spat. She flicked her tail playfully. "Don't you wonder who helped you? Who diverted the guards and left that little escape route for you?" His heart sank. Of course, it had been a setup. He'd known, deep down, but what choice had he had? "Even if I knew it was a trap," he growled, "I had to try." Ross Weiss's eyes sparkled with twisted satisfaction. "And yet, here I am, catching you so quickly. Tell me, Leon, what do you think will happen if you return to human territory with my mark on your chest?" Her voice was sweet, but the threat was unmistakable. "Do you think they'll still see you as the great dragon slayer?" Leon gritted his teeth. "I'd rather live as an ordinary person than be tortured by you." Ross Weiss laughed, a deep guttural sound that echoed through the trees. "You really don't appreciate my kindness, do you?" With a powerful sweep of her tail, she wrapped it around him, lifting him effortlessly into the air and placing him on top of her head. "Where are you taking me?" Leon shouted, struggling uselessly in her grip. Ross Weiss's voice was calm, almost teasing. "Since you're so eager to leave, I'll help you. Let's go back. Together." 3 hours later, the crisp air near the Empire's border was shattered by a loud thud as Leon crashed into a tree, courtesy of Ross Weiss's elegant aerial drop. He groaned, rubbing his head where it had collided with the ground. "Ow! Damn dragon!" he muttered, his body aching all over. As he turned his head, a flicker of light caught his eye. In the distance, a small town was illuminated by the erratic flashes of lightning. For a brief, hopeful second, he thought, "Is that a human town? Am I free?" But his hopes were dashed as Ross Weiss, now back in her human form, stepped gracefully beside him. "Yes, it's the human empire," she confirmed with an air of smug satisfaction. "But stepping over that line doesn't mean you can return to your precious little human world." Leon stared at her, confused and uneasy. Then, to his horror, he saw the dragon mark on her chest begin to glow. A split second later, his own mark responded, sending a burning sensation through his body. Ross Weiss grinned mischievously. "Oh, did I forget to mention? When one person with a dragon mark desires to be close to the other, the marks react. Can't you feel it, Leon?" His face twisted in disbelief. "Wait, what? You mean—" Before he could finish his sentence, Ross Weiss had already pinned him against a tree, her breath hot against his neck. "Feeling a little warm, aren't you?" she whispered. "Unable to resist?" Leon's mind was racing. "Here? You want to do this right here? In front of the Empire?" He was incredulous and a bit mortified, though that feeling was becoming increasingly hard to maintain under the circumstances. His body betrayed him, and he cursed the damn dragon magic. Ross Weiss's voice dripped with sarcasm as she leaned in closer. I thought it would be fitting for you to experience the shame right here. So close, yet so far from home. Her tail coiled around him and her grin widened. Leon, clutching his chest, tried to regain control. If you think this is going to break me, you're wrong, he declared, voice firm despite his current predicament. I'll wait patiently. When the time comes, I'll repay you double for all the humiliation you've put me through. Ross Weiss paused, her expression unreadable for a moment before she closed her eyes and nodded. I look forward to it, Leon. Whether you return alive or dead, I'll be waiting. The intimate moment passed, and afterward, Ross Weiss stretched with a satisfied sigh. She dressed herself casually and turned to Leon, who was now lying in a heap on the ground, utterly drained and feeling like he'd been run over by a wagon. Well, she said cheerfully, I'm very pleased with your performance. It exceeded expectations. Leon, barely able to move, muttered, I'm glad one of us is pleased. Ross Weiss knelt beside him, patting his cheek like he was some overexerted pet. How about I bring you here every month to visit your hometown? Wouldn't that be sweet? Leon's eyes snapped open in horror. No thanks. I'm pretty sure you've got your head in the clouds, dreaming about draining me dry. She smiled, amused. Oh, you're catching on. You've seen through my plans. With a casual flap of her wings, she was ready to take off. Come on, let's go home. Our daughter is waiting. Wait, Leon said through gritted teeth, struggling to sit up. I'm a dragon slayer, not some pet. I can walk on my own. Ross Weiss raised an eyebrow, half amused and half curious. Walk? It takes me 3 hours to fly to the castle. For a human like you, it would take, what, 10 days? 2 weeks? Leon, mustering the last of his defiance, stood up shakily. I may be human, but don't underestimate my endurance. I'll make it. She chuckled, clearly entertained by his stubbornness. Oh, this should be good. Let's see how long you last. And so Leon trudged through the forest, each step more laborious than the last. After what felt like hours, he could barely move, his legs trembling under the strain. Ross Weiss, floating lazily above him, finally called down. You look like you're struggling, Leon. Need a ride back? I'm not. Tired, he panted, refusing to admit defeat. Who said I was? Ross Weiss smirked. The only thing tough about you is your mouth. She twirled in the air, clearly enjoying his misery. Before Leon could reply, he noticed a group of armored figures approaching. His heart leapt. Dragon slayers. This could be it, he thought, suddenly hopeful. Maybe they can help me get rid of... He glanced back at Ross Weiss, who was watching the approaching army with a dark, murderous gleam in her eyes. His hope vanished instantly. If he called for help, she'd slaughter them without a second thought. The head of the group, a rugged man in armor, noticed them and waved. Hey there, you two lost? Leon, scratching his head awkwardly, forced a smile. No, just hanging out. You know, in the forest. Yeah, great cover, Leon. Real smooth. The man dismounted his horse, eyeing them curiously. Unusual place to hang out. There are dangerous creatures out here. He extended his hand. Walker, captain of the Imperial Dragon Squadron. You're welcome to join us. Leon, mentally screaming for Walker to turn around and run, forced another smile. Oh, thanks. But we're fine. We know some self-defense. Walker studied Leon for a moment. You look familiar. Have we met before? Leon froze, his eyes darting to Ross Weiss, whose expression had darkened significantly. Oh no. He acted quickly, grabbing Ross Weiss by the hand and pulling her close, wrapping an arm around her waist. Haha, must be mistaken, Leon said, flashing a forced grin. I've got one of those faces. Even my wife confuses me sometimes. Right, darling. Ross Weiss, eyebrow raised but playing along, smiled. In a low voice, Leon whispered, Help me get rid of them, and I'll go back with you." With a sickly sweet smile, Ross Weiss leaned into him. "Of course, dear." She looked back at Walker and waved dismissively. "We're just a happy couple. No need to worry." Walker chuckled, clearly convinced. "I see. Well, I won't disturb you two lovebirds any longer. Take care." He mounted his horse and rode off with his men. As soon as they were out of sight, Ross Weiss stepped back, folding her arms. "Did you enjoy that little hug?" Leon glared at her, still catching his breath. "Don't think this means anything," she smirked. "You were smart not to call for help. But let's be clear, Leon. Just because we have a child together, it doesn't mean you're my husband." Leon scoffed. "Trust me, I never considered it." With a flick of her tail, Ross Weiss turned away. "Good. Now let's get going. We still have a long way to go." Leon's hand throbbed with a sharp, burning pain as he trudged through the forest. He gritted his teeth, feeling the wounds on his palm reopen, blood trickling through his fingers. His vision blurred and the ground beneath him seemed to sway. "Damn it," he muttered, stumbling forward. But the pain intensified, and before he knew it, everything went black. He collapsed onto the dirt with a dull thud. Hearing the noise, Ross Weiss halted in mid-flight and turned around, sighing dramatically. "Humans. So fragile," she remarked, rolling her eyes. She casually released her power, transforming back into her magnificent dragon form, her scales gleaming in the moonlight, scooping Leon up with her mouth and tossing him into the air like a rag doll. He landed with a soft thump on her back, still completely unconscious. Ross Weiss flew gracefully toward the Silver Dragon Castle, glancing back at the limp figure sprawled across her back. This whole ordeal? Just a pathetic plea for mercy, she mused, half amused, half bored. By morning, Leon was back in the Silver Dragon Castle, still blissfully unaware of his predicament. Slowly, he regained consciousness, his eyes fluttering open to the sight of a bright, beaming face. "Dad's awake," Muon chirped cheerfully, bouncing on her toes beside his bed. Leon groaned, holding his aching head as he sat up. How did I end up back here?" he muttered, trying to shake off the fog. "Mom brought you home," Moon explained, practically glowing with pride. Leon's face darkened at the mention of Ross Weiss. "Of course she did. Caught me like prey," he grumbled under his breath, glaring at the ceiling. As he noticed the bandage wrapped around his injured hand, Leon raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing toward the white cloth. Muen's eyes lit up and she grabbed his hand enthusiastically. "I did it! I bandaged your hand, Dad!" She beamed, clearly proud of her work. Leon stared at his daughter, feeling an odd mix of disbelief and warmth. Dragons are supposed to be ferocious. Yet this little one, she's as innocent as they come. He recalled what a dragonologist had once said about dragons being born into violence, raised on blood. Yet here was Muen, half dragon, half human, treating him like the most important person in the world. "You're awesome, Morn," Leon said, patting her head with affection. Moon smiled so sweetly it almost hurt. Carefully, Leon added, "But listen, when you grow up, you must not become like your mother, okay?" Moon blinked up at him, her innocent eyes filled with confusion. Before she could respond, a cold voice came from the doorway. "And what's wrong with being like me?" Ross Weiss asked icily. Leon froze, caught off guard. He glanced at her, then quickly looked away, pretending to focus on something else. "Nothing," he muttered, feeling like a schoolboy caught talking back to the teacher. Moon, oblivious to the tension, proudly held up Leon's bandaged hand for Ross Weiss to see. "Look, Mom, I did it just like you told me to." Ross Weiss, her face expressionless, nodded. "Good. That's what you should do." Muon, eager to please, "Denise, nodded vigorously, agreeing with her mother. Leon watched the interaction, his irritation growing. Strict, way too strict. He knew Rosweiss was a harsh mother, but Muin was just a kid. She didn't need this kind of pressure. Patting Muin's head again, Leon smiled down at her. "Hey, why don't you go hide in the garden, huh? I'll come find you when I count to 100. Sound good?" Muin's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Really, Dad? We're gonna play hide and seek?" Leon nodded, smiling broadly. "Of course. I'm not like your mother. Now go. Hurry." Giggling with delight, Muin dashed off toward the garden, calling back, "Don't count too fast." Leon chuckled as he watched her go, his smile fading as he turned to Rosweiss. His expression hardened. "We need to talk." Rosweiss raised an eyebrow, her gaze cold and calculating. "About?" Leon stood, facing her fully. "You're being way too hard on Muin. She's not like the other dragons, and besides, she's so cute. Can't you bear to be a little gentler?" Rosweiss's eyes narrowed. "She's a dragon. Cute is not a compliment. It's an insult." Leon smirked, crossing his arms. "Well, for what it's worth, you're pretty cute too." Rosweiss's eyes flared with anger. In a flash, she grabbed Leon by the collar and yanked him closer, glaring at him. "You're just a slave for me to vent my frustrations on. Don't get ahead of yourself." For a moment, Leon put on a cute, exaggeratedly pathetic face, his eyes wide with mock innocence. Rosweiss, her anger still simmering, softened slightly and pulled him into a rough hug. "It's good that you understand." She leaned in close, her breath tickling his ear. "Remember, Leon, I'm the queen of the Silver Dragon clan. I have government affairs to deal with. The task of taking care of Muin falls to you." Leon blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in her tone. "What?" Rosweiss pulled back slightly, a wicked smile on her face. "The kid likes you. You're her favorite, after all." Gathering himself, Leon headed toward the garden. As Leon strolled through the garden, Rosweiss's words echoed in his mind. "I'm the Dragon Queen, and I'm busy." He chuckled bitterly to himself. "Of course. Who better to leave with the kid than the Dragon Slayer? Makes perfect sense. Not like I have anything better to do. Like slay dragons, maybe." He sighed, feeling the irony heavy in his chest. The Queen of Dragons was too occupied with her royal duties, so naturally the terrifying, battle-hardened Dragon Slayer had to play nanny. His thoughts were interrupted when he noticed Mon hiding, not very well, mind you, behind a pillar, peeking at him. Her tiny body was barely concealed, and her tail swayed behind her like a flag in the wind. Leon smirked. "Cute. Too cute. Does she really think I can't see her?" He pointed at her dramatically. "Found you, Muin," he announced in his best dad voice, expecting a giggle or at least some kind of reaction. But nothing. Not a sound. Muin simply stared at him with an unnervingly cold expression, her eyes void of the usual playful warmth. The silence dragged on, the wind whistling through the garden as if mocking him. Leon felt a pang of awkwardness, scratching the back of his head. "Uh-oh, did I screw this up?" He cleared his throat and tried to make amends. Hey, sorry for making you wait." His voice faltered as he watched her unblinking stare. And then, without a word, Muin bolted, her little feet carrying her away like a gust of wind. "Wait, what? Muin?" Leon called after her, confused. "Why are you running? Come on, kid." He sprinted after her, trying to catch up. What's with the sudden mood swing? Kids are like dragons, completely unpredictable. Muin turned the corner, and by the time Leon reached the spot, she was gone. He stopped, breathless, looking around in bewilderment. Where the hell did she go?" he muttered to himself, spinning around. He had just seen her dart past, but now it was as if she'd vanished into thin air. Leon sighed, wiping his brow. This is why Ross Weiss stuck me with this job. She knew I'd be running circles around this garden, trying to figure out how a child's mind works. He shook his head, half amused, half frustrated. Just as he was about to call out again, Moon reappeared, seemingly out of nowhere, beaming with delight. She rushed up behind him and hugged him tightly around the waist. "Gotcha, Dad," she squealed, her cheerful voice cutting through his confusion. Leon blinked in surprise, turning to look down at her. Wait, hold on. Didn't you just run past me? Why were you running?" Moon looked up at him with innocent confusion, tilting her head. "Run? I didn't run, Dad. I was looking for you because you couldn't find me," she explained, her voice so sincere it made Leon second-guess his own memory. Leon furrowed his brow. "What do you mean I couldn't find you? He paused, realizing he was trying to win an argument with the child. "Did I imagine that of me?" He glanced around the garden, still trying to piece together what had just happened. "Am I losing it? I swear I saw her, but..." Before he could spiral further, Moon grabbed his hand, tugging at him with all the enthusiasm of a child with a secret. "Come on, Dad, I have something to show you. You have to see it," she chirped, dragging him along. Leon, still puzzled but unable to resist her excitement, allowed himself to be pulled forward. All right, I'm coming," he grumbled, though the corner of his mouth twitched into a smile. What could possibly go wrong now? As they walked deeper into the garden, however, Leon wasn't aware of the other Moon standing silently behind him, watched him with a mix of determination and hesitation. Her small hands clenched into tiny fists, and though she didn't make a sound, it was clear she wanted to approach him. Yet something held her back, something deeper in her nature, colder, harsher. In the peaceful serenity of the dragon's garden, Moon, Leon's adorable half-dragon daughter, hums away joyfully as she sketches with intense focus. Leon, sitting nearby, watches her with that soft, mushy expression only a father can have. For a moment, this hardened dragon slayer, the man who once dreamed of only slaying these creatures, feels his soul inexplicably healed. Who knew having a daughter could be so heartwarming? It's almost suspicious. As Moon proudly finishes her drawing, Leon's mind races. Clenching his fist with determination, he resolves to save his sweet Muumuu from the clutches of the Silver Dragon Queen. Sooner or later, he thinks, we'll escape this scaly overlord. Moon bounces over, holding her masterpiece. "Dad, look, I drew a family portrait." She beams at him with those innocent, dragon-sized eyes. Leon's chest swells with pride. "You're awesome, Moon. Truly worthy of being your daddy's daughter," he praises, convinced that his bloodline has produced sheer artistic genius. But then, his eyes narrow. Wait, what's this? Why are there 4 people in the drawing? His heart skips a beat. Pointing to the extra child, he asks, "Moon, why are there 2 kids here?" Without missing a beat, Moon cheerfully replies, "That's my sister." Leon's world screeches to a halt. Sister. The realization crashes over him like a tidal wave of regret. He didn't just hit the target once. Nope, he apparently knocked out a 2-for-1 deal. Holding his head, he groans internally. That child I saw in the garden. That's why she looked ready to incinerate me when I called her the wrong name. Moon, completely unfazed by her father's internal meltdown, observes him with curiosity. Moon thinks her sister isn't mad. She's just shy when she sees Dad. Leon, wearing a look of utter disbelief but trying to hold it together, nods. Yeah, totally normal. We haven't exactly had the best meet your long-lost father moments, huh? As he glances toward the massive dragon castle in the distance, his thoughts turn darker. It's all the dragon's fault, hiding one of my kids from me. Typical dragon behavior. This has gone on long enough. With newfound fury, Leon decides he's getting answers. Now. Minutes later, the door to Ross Weiss's study slams open with enough force to shake the whole room. Startled, the little dragon perched on the desk lets out a tiny squeak, while Ross Weiss calmly places a document into an envelope, barely batting an eye at Leon's dramatic entrance. "Ross Weiss," Leon growls, fists clenched, eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me I had another daughter?" The Silver Dragon Queen raises an eyebrow, her lips curling into an amused smirk. "You didn't know already?" she asks, with the tone of someone asking if he'd forgotten his own name. Leon slams his fist onto the desk, the sound echoing through the room. "You've been hiding her, I have to thank you, what a shock. Giving birth to one kid is hard enough, but you went ahead and gave me two. Such dedication." His voice drips with sarcasm. "When I return to the Empire, I'll make sure your name's carved into our family tree for this hard work." Ross Weiss, clearly enjoying this, folds her arms and tilts her head. "And do you know why I didn't tell you about our eldest?" Her eyes glint with amusement. Leon, still riding the wave of righteous indignation, snaps, "Because you're jealous of how close I am to Moon. You've been keeping Noah from me out of spite, haven't you?" Ross Weiss, still smirking, leans forward. "Oh, so now you're eager to meet her?" "Of course," Leon shoots back arrogantly. "What kind of father wouldn't want to meet his own daughter? Unlike you, I'm not some cold, stern dragon mother. I want to bond with my child." Ross Weiss lets out a low chuckle. "Very well, I'll show you, but don't come crying to me when you regret it." Her eyes gleam with a cryptic challenge. In the cozy chaos of the kitchen, Leon laughs heartily, brandishing a knife like he's starring in a cooking show. "Ross Weiss," he shouts with a grin, expertly slicing vegetables like he's auditioning for Dragon Chef. Oh yes, today's the day he'll impress her. The mother of his children, and more importantly, his eldest daughter. His grand plan, winning her over with a delicious home-cooked meal. Because, of course, nothing says, "Please love me, daughter, I never knew I had," like a hearty cream stew. As he stirs the pot, memories flood back. He used to make this very stew for his old team, back when he wasn't juggling fatherhood and dragons with killer side eyes. Everyone said it was good back then, he muses, tasting the stew and nodding in satisfaction. Still got it. He imagines Noah, the eldest, the cold one, taking a bite, her icy demeanor melting away as she declares, "Dad's cooking is the best." Outside the kitchen, the maids peek in through the window, clearly baffled. "The prince cooking again?" one whispers. Didn't he just recover from a near-death experience? And now he's whipping up a 5-course meal. He's a good male dragon, though, caring for his family like that. Her friend nods. Good dragon, but is it just me, or is he too eager? Before they can theorize further, the regal figure of Ross Weiss approaches with their 2 daughters in tow, Moon, bubbly as always, and Noah glaring like she's already plotting world domination. The maids bow deeply, addressing her as Your Majesty, while Moon waves like she's on a parade float. Noah predictably stares at them as if they are beneath her notice. Ross Weiss dismisses the maids, telling them to take the night off. "Go rest," she says, her voice cold as ever. "We won't need you for dinner tonight." The maids bow in gratitude, practically fleeing the scene. Something tells them this meal won't be a typical family dinner. Inside the kitchen, Leon finishes setting the table, beaming with pride as Ross Weiss and the girls enter. "Perfect timing," he says, rubbing his hands together. Moon runs up to him with a big smile. "Dad, it smells so good." Leon grins, patting her head. "I heard you both love meat, so I made stew and steak, just for you." He beams even more as he glances at Noah, trying to gauge her reaction. Surely his culinary skills will break through that icy exterior. Right? Wrong? Noah doesn't smile, doesn't blink. Heck, she barely looks at him. Instead, she stares coldly for a moment, then turns away without saying a word. Leon's grin falters. His jaw drops as his hopeful fantasy shatters into a million pieces. Wait, what? He thought this would be the moment. He made stew, for crying out loud. How could she resist the stew? Glancing nervously at Rossweiss, who stands there with her usual smug expression, he clenches his teeth. Of course, it's her. She must have planned this. That dragon has always had the upper hand, and now she's using their daughter to hit him where it hurts. Introduce yourself, Noah, Rossweiss commands coolly, clearly enjoying the tension. This is your first formal meeting. Noah steps forward, arms folded, mirroring her mother's stoic posture. I'm Noah K. Melkver, she says flatly, like a disinterested secretary reading off a grocery list. The eldest daughter of the Silver Dragon Queen. I'm 1 year and 2 months old. Leon, still trying to salvage the situation, extends his hand with a forced smile. Leon Cosmode, your father, he says, hoping for some spark of connection. Come on, just say something nice, he pleads internally. Just one little, hi, Dad. Noah stares at his hand as if it's a dead fish. Oh, she replies, giving him absolutely nothing. No warmth, no recognition, just a single syllable of pure indifference. Leon awkwardly chuckles, but inside, he's dying. Why does she hate me? Is it the stew? Is she allergic? What is happening? Meanwhile, Moon, ever the mediator, leans over to whisper in Noah's ear. Don't be so cold. Dad worked really hard on this, she hisses. Noah folds her arms tighter, narrowing her eyes at Leon. He seems weak, she says bluntly. Is he really our father? Boom. The words hit Leon like a thunderclap. He stumbles back, clutching his chest dramatically as if she'd just stabbed him with a sword. Weak. Me? He coughs, half choking on the pain. This child is merciless. His pride, his dragon slayer pride, is in tatters. This is worse than any battle wound. As Leon grimaces, trying to process this emotional beatdown, he thinks bitterly, what a filial daughter. His career as a father has officially entered its first major crisis, and it's not looking good. And that's it for today. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. See you in the next adventure.